Every year a new iPhone comes out, and every year we're told by social media and reviews that it's pretty much the same as last year, which can't always be true, obviously. Well, this year the iPhone 16 Pro is actually... I'm just kidding, this is pretty much the same thing as last year. Hello everyone, this is Matt from Real World Review, and welcome to this journey that is the yearly iPhone review. Here I have the iPhone 16 Pro, but do note I am upgrading from the iPhone 14 Pro, and honestly, if you had an older phone, this would be a solid upgrade. Coming from the 14 Pro, it's debatable. Anyways, let's get started. Now, this seems like a normal review if you look at the timestamps, but iPhones are weird. They are the same but different from other phones. I mean, the design is what you would expect from a normal iPhone Pro, being the 6th generation of the Pro name. And just like the iPhone 11 Pro, 13 Pro, and 14 Pro, they share the same specs as a Pro Max, besides the obvious battery and phone size differences. That's why I don't have an iPhone 16 Pro here. This is just an iPhone 15 Pro Max, but I'm still putting it into the title. Either way, here's the iPhone 16 Pro with this glass front and back with the titanium frame. The 16 Pro is taller than the 15 Pro by a decent amount, but that's because they made the 15 Pro smaller than the 14 Pro, so compared to the 14 Pro, there's a super small difference. It is heavier too, being 199 and 227 grams on the 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max respectively. That's up 12 and 6 grams, and maybe the difference is because the metal shell is only around the 16 Pro battery, not on the Max. On the top, we have a single antenna band, while the left side is where we get the flashlight button. I mean the action button, and the volume buttons. I have no idea why Apple didn't let you single, double, or triple click this button. Simply hold to trigger an action. That's it. Technically on the Apple Watch Ultra, you can actually hold the action button to quickly change the action that it does. It's kind of clunky, but definitely quicker than the iPhone, and still technically adds more features. With all that said, it's still not as good as what Samsung does on their watches. Then on the right side, we have the side button that now, as in literally now, or near the end of October 2024, allows for new Siri, as well as finally triggering Apple Intelligence. Under that, we get two things, the camera control button and the death of a single millimeter wave 5G antenna. Unlike Notch Island, I can't really think of a better name than the camera control button, but I also can't figure out a use for this dumb design. It is pressure sensitive, but also has a physical button that compresses. I've also heard people say that it's super shallow compared to other buttons, but it clicks just like every other button on the left and right side of the phone. On the bottom, we have the 5-hole speaker grill, which not only pairs with a small slit at the top of the screen to produce a stereo feel, but also includes a microphone on the bottom and on the top where both speakers sit. The top one is for Siri and dictation, while the bottom one is used for noise canceling. The other 3 holes hide another microphone. Nothing special to say here. Then of course we get the 2 bottom screws as well as the USB-C 3 port, which we can call USB 3.2 since it does 10 gigabit per speed out of the port, and I don't know if it's Gen 1X2 or Gen 2X1 because USB naming is dumb now. Apple is actually underplaying the speed by saying it's simply USB 3. They also make charging difficult to understand as I don't really know the max charging speed that this phone is capable of. It was rumored to be 45 watts, but in reality, tests for the iPhone 16 Pro go to about 30 watts. For me, I'm only seeing a max of 20 watts with it going over that when you're gaming or doing processor heavy tasks while under 80% charge. So who really knows how fast it actually charges? For me, it feels slow, especially when 90% and higher charging takes forever, literally taking at least 2 minutes to go from 90% to 91%. It feels like even with optimized charging off, it still throttles charging speeds. On the back of this titanium phone, we get the ceramic, it's just normal glass. It still has the matte glass with the camera area being glossy. We get the usual 3 cameras with a hole for the 4th and last microphone, the LiDAR scanner, and the adaptive True Tone flash, something that was born to make images look better at night, but doomed to simply be a flashlight. We get MagSafe back here, allowing for up to 25 watts of wireless charging with the new MagSafe puck, while Qi 2 charging allows for 15 watts, just like the old school 15 watt MagSafe puck that I have here. On the front, we get the ceramic shield, which I always protect with a tempered glass screen protector because they're not scratch proof, and I wouldn't even call them scratch resistant. If you would consider this scratch resistant, then the phone's IP68 dust and water resistance makes sense, as eventually water will get into this phone. The screen itself is a 6.3-inch flat 1206p display that runs at up to 120 Hz thanks to that ProMotion display, while the 16 Pro Max is a 6.9-inch 1320p display, but both feature that 120 Hz and same pixel density at 460 pixels per inch. They come with a class-leading 1000 nits standard brightness, with 1600 nits for HDR and 2000 nits for outdoor usage. I'm just kidding about the class-leading part because not only does the Pixel 9 beat that, but these are the same specs as the iPhone 14 Pro, minus 0.2 inches. The only difference is that the 16 Pros can now go down to 1 nit, which would be impressive if the iPhone 14 Pro didn't go down to the GSM Arena tested 2 nits. Sure, 50% difference, but literally by 1 nit. Still, viewing content is amazing on here, with the bezels looking thinner than ever, even though Notch Island likes to get in the way when you're watching shorts or wide aspect videos, while 20:9 or wider content just lives with the Notch Island in it. I'm still on the fence if the island is a better option over the standard notch, as it seems to glitch a lot for me, and the extra space on the top is just wasted. But when that's not in the way, content on this display looks spectacular, but also doesn't really feel like it's improved since the iPhone 14 Pro. It does kind of feel like the phone is slightly smoother, but there's some stuff like the always on display that just get pushed to the side after, iOS 16.2? This just feels like trash compared to any other always on display, just like the Apple Watch. Apple should really copy Google or just let us actually customize the always on display. There's literally 2 toggles besides off and on. The strange thing is that the iPhone 14 Pro, 15 Pro, and 16 Pro all share the same camera apertures and megapixel count, with the exception of the ultra-wide camera on the 16 Pros. For the front camera, we get the same focusable 12 megapixel sensor that looks a little bit different thanks to Smart HDR5 that the 15 series brought in, but with better photographic styles that seem to be optional, just like portrait mode. See, now you can simply take a picture, change it to portrait, the type of portrait, and change the photographic style after the fact. With the 13 and 14 series, you take a photo with a photographic style, that's it. Now you get the freedom to change it in post or before, but also, who's the person that thought baking styles into the file should be a thing? Sure, you can bake LUTs into files on cameras, but there's generally a toggle to turn that on or off. Apple figured it out on the portrait mode, making all of it optional, but only took 3 years to do that for photographic styles. Anyways, back to the cameras. They let you film at 4K at 60 frames per second on all sensors, including the front camera. The rear cameras are, again, the same as usual, but somehow better. The ultra-wide camera gets bumped to a 48 megapixel for the first time and is still focusable, allowing for actually good ultra-wide shots, I gotta admit. Still not the best fall off, even though it claims to be an f2.2 and the f2.8 telephoto has way more depth to it, but still a pretty good camera, especially since it's normally nothing special for close shots. The main camera is also a 48 megapixel fusion camera, which I don't know what that means, but generally shoots 24 or 12 megapixel shots if you choose, and allows for a 2x optical zoom to get a 12 megapixel sensor cropped shot, which still looks fine, but may bring in less light in low light situations. This has a newer generation sensor shift stabilization and does pretty well at 4K 60 frames per second. It even shoots 120 frames per second in 4K, allowing for some quality slow motion shots. Finally. This is not new, of course, as the OnePlus 9 Pro could do this in 2021, but the iPhone 16 Pros can also do ProRes 4K 60 and 120 in log, meaning that this would actually be a solid B-cam, assuming you have the external storage. Those ProRes 422 HQ files can add up pretty quick. Would be nice if you can change that to regular 422 or even 422 LT, not proxy though, that's just straight trash. With a Blackmagic app, you actually can. You can also shoot in camera with that app. While using the Apple camera, you need to have an external SSD to shoot 4K 60 or 4K 120 in ProRes, though you can shoot both in the normal HEVC format without an external drive. Makes you wonder why you pay for the 1TB version. Lastly, we have the 12 megapixel telephoto camera that looks like it was just ripped out of the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and both iPhone 16 Pros now have the 3D sensor shift for stabilization, and it's a 5 times telephoto sensor regardless of the size. While nice, I do miss the optical 3x zoom. How about if they have a 48 megapixel 3 times telephoto that sensor crops to give you a 12 megapixel shot at a 6x optical zoom? Now that actually seems like a better choice, and probably something they're going to do on the iPhone 24 Pro. But by then, we're probably going to want a 10x zoom. Overall, these cameras are spectacular and, as usual, give you lots of choices for photography and videography at a reasonable price point. And this thing even makes calls. But let me show you the pictures and videos that I shot. Enjoy. It's honestly no secret that the iPhone is coveted for its camera as well as for its video features, and this year they took it even further. That said, lots of these features are going to end up being important for people in my field, and for the average person, that HD 30 frames per second is going to be the only video recording that they take. Seriously, I know people that don't even move to 4K 30 for video, which feels insane to me. They also don't lock the cameras, let the macro video, which looks terrible, take over, and are perfectly fine with the auto FPS feature making your video look fast and then slow when it gets dark. When you start digging into formats, it does get a little confusing, which I actually do appreciate. We get all these options, but can't disable if your phone gets disabled when you type your password in wrong too many times. I don't get that. We get spatial video and photos, but the video is still only 1080p 30 frames per second, because why? Also, I don't really need to tell you this because if you drop $3,500 on the Apple Vision Pro, you probably know all the iPhone 16 Pro specs, or can just look it up right now. I left the processor for this section for a few reasons. This phone has the Apple A18 Pro chip, which is paired with iOS 18.1, giving you access to two things. One, this chip is identical to the MacBook Air's M1 processor with the 7-core GPU, and yes, I'm talking about single and multi-core scores, as well as GPU performance in benchmarks. And even that small 8GB of RAM. There's no surprise that this can actually play games like Death Stranding, with graphic limitations that are shared with iPads with the M processors, as well as the iPhone 15 Pros. But what is this for? Well, it's for normal apps and maybe photo and video editing stuff. I would rather literally not have a phone than be forced to do either of those on my phone only, but the power clearly is there. This also affects battery with that. Now, in test, it is actually better, but in real life usage, this battery just feels like my iPhone 14 Pro battery that sits at 80% battery health. Good, but not amazing. This makes sense because I just told you it comes with the same power that a MacBook Air that has a 49.9 watt hour battery, while this phone sits at a 13.94 watt hour cell and 17.95 watt hour cell on the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Of course, your mileage may vary and a day of battery life is clearly easy to do, but I expected at least a 20% increase in battery usage when compared to my old iPhone 14 Pro, and just didn't get that. But maybe it's thanks to the Apple Intelligence, which still does nothing, truly. There are some smart replies for messages and apparently in the email app, but also, do we need stuff like that? It feels so generic and fake because it is. Your phone doesn't grab much, if any, information about you, so it just has to learn over time how you talk and try to help it sound more like you and less like machine learning. I'm not hooked on it, and the only thing I like is the summarization of things that AI brings in general. Don't want to read a full contract? Use some form of AI to do it for you. The promise was the Apple Intelligence would be good in October. Now it says it's going to be good in December, which at that point will be going into 2025 to get more and more Apple Intelligent features, and even longer if you're not living in the US. And guess what? All of this works on the iPhone 15 Pro, so why even upgrade is a saying that rings so true if you want to upgrade to a device that runs slightly faster, has questionably better repairable parts, and has a poorly placed camera shutter. So poorly placed that, first off, any videos that Apple posts is a lie. My fingers are fairly long, and it's an awkward stretch to get to that button in landscape mode. And vertically, you have to awkwardly move your phone up to reach it. The action button is placed perfectly for this, but then you cover the cameras. And secondly, even now, apparently we don't even get all the features that the button is supposed to bring. Okay, this section ended up harping on 2 features, but those are the features that this $1,000 to $1,600 phone comes with, and technically Apple Intelligence isn't even new, even though Apple says that this phone was built for AI. Well, you're technically not getting much out of it if you're buying this phone right now. And that sums it up. Coming from the iPhone 14 Pro, I like the camera capabilities, and sure, I miss the 3x optical zoom, and 5x does look pretty good, though I rarely go for that lens. But if you don't care about those features, even coming from an iPhone 13 Pro, this phone doesn't really feel like a well-needed upgrade. Honestly, you probably just need a new battery in your phone. You might enjoy this upgrade if you have the 13 Pro and newer, but if you have the 12 Pro and older, then this will be a solid upgrade just for the Pro Motion Display alone. I would also recommend buying used now, seeing that my 1TB cost $1,500 new, and there's already examples of that being barely to largely under retail. And this applies for lower gigabyte versions. And yes, I know they have the 128, 256, 512GB, and 1TB options, but stick to 256 or 512 gigabytes unless you truly need that 1TB. Don't even waste your money or your time on a 128 gigabyte device like I did with the Pixels. The iPhone 16 Pro is a treat to use, but that's exactly what it is, a treat. This is not something that will make a 15 Pro user happy, and maybe not even the average 14 Pro user. But this is for a non-pro user that wants to get a better screen, or for some reason wants to go from the 2x to 5x optical zoom. This is truly a phone to treat someone with, not a phone that you absolutely need to buy. The only reason I have this is because I never got the iPhone 15 Pro, and I want the extra camera features. Outside of that and this channel, I would have never bought this phone, especially brand new. And that is my review for the iPhone 16 Pro, as well as the iPhone 16 Pro Max, as they clearly are the same phone with a bigger battery and screen. But what do you think? Do you think I'm actually a fanboy of Apple? Was I too mean or too soft on this phone? Let me know, and as always, thanks for watching.